you, Elizabeth, and thank you to everybody for coming out. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here to discuss this work. We started this project about 14 years ago, so it's very exciting to bring it to fruition and get a chance to share it with you. I want to thank MOAD for having us. I want to thank my co-author, Waldo Martin, who 14 years ago saw a project that really needed to happen. And I had been an organizer a long time, and he said, you really need to turn this into a bigger project, and we worked together on this for 14 years, and he's been there every step. It's been an amazing partnership, and so thank you, Waldo. I want to thank Professor Taylor for coming and moderating this event. I want to thank Billy X, who's here, the chair of Alumni Association. It's about time for the Black Panther Party, and other former Panther members in the audience. And I want to give a very special thanks. I'm very honored, and we are very lucky to have here with us tonight Chairman Bobby Seale, the founder with Huey Newton of Black Panther Party. And Chairman Seale is in the process of producing a film, and this is going to be a very important film. There have been several films about the Panthers, different aspects, but they really haven't done justice to the broader history. And so this is a really important project that Chairman Seale is taking on, and we're very fortunate he's going to get a chance to talk to us all about that as well. So he's going to be coming up as a special guest to speak after Waldo. So let me jump in. It's a big book, and I'm not going to take a lot of time here, but I want to give you sort of the outline of the project and our argument. And I'm going to run through some of the photos. We're lucky to have 50 photos in the book. A few of them here I'm going to share with you tonight. This afternoon. So we really started this project asking, why in this moment in the mid-'60s, after the tremendous success of the civil rights movement and really the demonstrated power of nonviolent civil disobedience and claims for participation in American citizenship and rights, why at this moment in the late 60s did the Black Panther Party and revolutionary claims and a challenge to America as empire, why did this politics become so influential and important? Why did so many young revolutionaries in cities throughout the country take up arms and dedicate their lives to revolution and the Black Panther Party? And so I'm going to touch on a few themes that we develop in the book, just to give you sort of a taste of some of the pieces of the answer here. The first thing is that one of the things that was very surprising to me when we started to look at this is that in the mid-'60s, there were debates, rigorous debates happening in cities throughout the country, LA, San Francisco and Oakland, Chicago, New York, a real ferment, a Black Power ferment of people asking, how do we take the gains and the successes and the power of the civil rights movement, and how do we translate that into the kind of power that can really challenge poverty and ghettoization? The civil rights movement had been tremendously successful at dismantling Jim Crow, at dismantling formal segregation. But what it didn't do is it didn't provide an insurgent means to really transform poverty. It didn't provide a way to change ghettoization. It didn't reach the full goals that the participants in the civil rights movement were really aspiring to, of freedom, of power. And so what you had in the starting really in '66, it became a very big call. It was a question: Black Power. How do we build Black Power? And there were dozens of organizations in most major cities asking this question and trying to think about it. And there were a lot of different kinds of approaches. One important kind of theoretical answer to this was to say, we're not just going to, it's not that we just want to be part of America. America, as it's constituted, is an imperial power. And we need to really challenge that imperialism as part and parcel of the anti-imperial and anti-colonial struggles, not only in Africa, but internationally. And so there were organizations in the Bay Area that were asking that question on a small scale. One organization the Panthers call Armchair Revolutionists was the Revolutionary Action Movement. Both Bobby Seale and Huey Newton participated in the Revolutionary Action Movement and drew a number of ideas from there. But there were all different kinds of answers, right? And nothing had really emerged to be able to really tap that power of disruption. And what Huey Newton and Bobby Seale did that really started to provide an answer to the Black Power question was that they created a way to stand up to police brutality. And if you think about that moment, 65, the Watts Rebellion, there have been urban rebellions all across the country, and some of them very large, like in Watts. And these were really expressions of resistance to containment policing strategies. You had massive migration of black folks to the cities in the north and the west, and the jobs that had attracted people during the wars had fled with white flight also. And municipalities had responded with containment policing. We're not going to deal with poverty. We're not going to deal with ghettoization. We're going to contain it, right? So you had many young people living in ghettos who were just really being brutalized and fed up with it, but didn't necessarily have recourse to institutionalized channels. You have to remember that in this moment, despite the triumph of civil rights, that you had only 6 congressmen nationally who had been elected as national congressmen. You had very little access of black people to elite universities. You had almost exclusively white police departments, not only in the Bay Area, but in most cities in the country, and fire departments, and exclusion from the political apparatus and machines, right? So that on a local level, there was very little electoral representation, right? So that in this moment of civil rights triumphalism, the reality was that there was very little institutional recourse, right? And so people were asking, how do we do what the civil rights movement did? How do we, through standing up and making business as usual impossible, how do we create a source of power? And Bobby Seale and Huey Newton figured out a way to do that by standing up to police brutality. Now, initially, those armed patrols were completely legal. They had studied the law. They knew at what distance they needed to stand, when that the guns could not be loaded in the cars, that a felon could not carry a handgun, all the very specific legislation around when and where it was legal, and they emulated some tactics that were being done in LA with the Community Alert Patrol and started to patrol the police and stand up. And this drew a local following in Oakland of young adults who said, yeah, that's power. That's standing up to our oppressor. We're going to join in, because we're not just going to sit there and talk about revolution and talk about anti-imperialism like the Revolutionary Action Movement, but this gives us a way to actually stand up against brutality. When this really changed to a bigger scale, right, there were these small patrols in Oakland standing up and following the police and patrolling the police. When this really changed was when a young man named Denzel Dow was killed in North Richmond, an unincorporated area north of Oakland. And neighbors, he was killed by the police, shot in the back. And there was a lot of evidence that this was unjustified murder, but there was no official recourse. People tried petitions, they tried talking to the politicians, they tried talking to the sheriff, and basically the story was, sorry, we're not going to do anything about this. And the standard civil rights organizations didn't have a response. So some folks called Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, and they went up with some of their delegations. And pretty soon you had not 1, not 5, not 10, but hundreds of black people rallying in North Richmond and bringing their own weapons and saying, we're gonna create our own governance, right? And so this puts the party on a whole different scale, because now this is really seen by the political establishment as a threat. And what happens, of course, is that the state steps in and says, okay, we can't have this. We're going to actually change the gun law and restrict the right to bear arms, right? So, and interestingly, right, the NRA in this period is in favor of some restrictions on the Second Amendment, and Ronald Reagan and the Assembly pushed through this legislation to restrict the right to bear arms and make